Good to see you. Welcome, everyone. So glad you can join me and Arnie as we continue to welcome amazing guests for this very special Maccabi USA Sports Show. Arnie, I am having a lot of fun doing this. I hope you are too.
Oh, Donna, it's been a blast. We've been at this for about 3 months now, and you're so fun to co-host. And we have had incredible guests, including the one we're going to have tonight. So I'm really looking forward to this evening. It's going to be a wonderful show, and we'll banter you and I a little bit during the show and after the show, and get into sports in the era of COVID.
I have to study up because I'm never sure where the banter is going to go, Arnie, but we remain inspired by our mission of building Jewish pride through sports. And tonight we welcome an additional guest host who has some questions, our Maccabi USA Vice President, Don Kent, who also happens to be a former employee, or an executive, I should say, of JFNA. So looking forward to seeing you, Don. It's another wonderful evening together. It's great to see what's now becoming familiar faces. And of course, welcome some rookies. So hello, everyone. If you're keeping score, just want to let you know the virus is still winning. But Arnie, I do have to say that quarantine has its innovations and, a silver lining. As Maccabi at home programming, I think it's been a real winner. So kudos to the entire team. We're here because of that and many other programs. And so, okay, we can chalk up one for that. The NBA so far has put up a notable score for those of you who are following. You can even say it's a first one. They announced their last tests taken of their 350 plus athletes. There were 0 cases of COVID. I don't know why I find that so, I find it very positive. I find it motivational because it can be done, and hoping we will be hear a little bit more about that from our guest this evening as we talk about the NFL getting underway. We best know Mark Wilf as a Maccabi dad. Stephen and Daniel both participated, both were junior golfers, and I first met Mark and his wife Jane at a beautiful dinner sitting atop of a really sweet building in Jaffa in Israel for the 2013 games, and we got to talk about what else but his son's golf game. I mean, what better conversation could you have with another parent of a Maccabi athlete? Because all of us take such pride in bringing along our next generation of athletes. Mark is a Princeton Tiger, once and always. He actually called Princeton basketball radio games on WPRB. I'm hoping, Mark, you will tell us your favorite. I'm hoping what?
And football.
And football. Okay, well, let me just say this. The person who called me today wanted to make sure that you will tell us your favorite Princeton basketball player. He's on the call tonight, and he's also a Maccabi dad, by the way. And if you don't say Howard Levy, he'd be very disappointed.
Oh, Howard's on. Great.
Yep. Most people know that
one of my favorite players, if not the favorite.
Most people know that Mark is the owner-president of the Minnesota Vikings. He led the initiative for a new stadium, US Bank Stadium. By the way, I did get to visit it. It is so beautiful and impressive, and has successfully led the bid to bring Super Bowl 52 in 2018 to Minnesota. He will share and answer questions, of course, about the Vikings. I'm sure you guys are all getting ready about asking some NFL questions. But there's so much to admire about Mark and his family. And it's really his personal commitment to ensure the welfare and vitality of the Jewish community. I think that speaks to all of our hearts. He's a son of Holocaust survivors, Elizabeth and Joseph Wilf. And it is truly his parents' experiences so inspired and motivated how he chooses to live his life. Mark is the current chair of the JFNA Board of Trustees, the Jewish Federation of North America, as well as chairing the JFNA's national initiative that addresses the needs of impoverished Holocaust survivors in the United States. He's a father of 4, a husband to Jane, and our very, very special guest this evening, Mark Wilf. Mark, thank you for joining us. We are really appreciative.
Donna, thank you and Arnie and Don, who's co-hosting tonight. Heard a lot about the show, and it's something that's great you're giving to all the Maccabi supporters and the general world that's interested in sports. So great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Arnie, you want to kick us off tonight? Or do you want to? Okay.
I will. Looking forward to it. It really is an honor. I get to see Mark in action every day through his chairmanship of JFNA. And Mark, you're just doing an amazing job leading this such an important national organization, we'll talk a little bit more about this. I know Don wants to talk to you a little about JFNA in a couple minutes. But we're gonna get everybody on the call. We're gonna get to sports. I promise you, we're gonna talk Vikings football and NFL. But I thought we'd start out with maybe some off the field, and I think I want to lead with what Donna started with, which is, your two kids playing in Buenos Aires and then Israel in Pan Am and Maccabi USA. Just talk a little bit about what that experience was like for your family, certainly your kids, and how they feel about it today, and kind of what the Maccabi family means to you, given the experience that you've gone through.
Well, I think a lot of people on the call, I see so many friendly faces that I've seen through the Maccabi. I see Bob Spivak and others, and it's just a great way for young people to be engaged with other young people, learn about Israel, learn about the Jewish community, and my kids were no exception. Of course, the JCCs have the local Maccabi games and all those kind of things, and all four of Jane and my kids were athletes: soccer, golf, other sports, basketball. And you mentioned my two older ones. My oldest one, Stephen, we went to Argentina with him. He competed in golf, and that was a great experience. And to meet delegations from all over the world, and to realize we're one mishpacha and one community, that was really powerful through sports. And then where I met Donna on the trip to Israel, the World Games. And my son qualified to be on the U.S. team, and that was a great experience, I know, for him. And so just a great experience, not just to bond with your team and your country, but just to learn about our Zionist tradition, the great history of the Maccabi games. And again, when you see the athletes, Olympic level athletes, world champions that compete at this level, it's just exciting as I know many of you are in various forms of competition in the past or currently even, just to participate. There's a real sense of family and mishpacha among it. And as parents, we're very proud of it and very honored to be supporters as well. It's a great organization.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Don Kent, our first vice president. I know Don has some questions he has. And Don, if you're on, it's in your corner.
There we go. So, Mark, I don't know if you remember, we first met about 25 or 30 years ago. You were a young leadership, one of our rising stars in young leadership. I was one of the executives at what was then called Council of Jewish Federations. It's been great to watch you grow into the amazing person you are and great inspirational leader. So I want to share with you a story. And out of it, hopefully something great will come from this. So, I was very involved in developing this whole idea of FRD, financial resource development in the federation system. Very proud of it. Very exciting to see what's happened in the system since then. It's always been a little frustrating to me since I left the federation system that Maccabi USA has not found a place to connect with the organized Jewish community in a way that I think the organized Jewish community could embrace and benefit. And this was driven home to me in the last Maccabi USA. Here I was in Jerusalem. I was on the men's master soccer team, and we were staying in a pretty nice place. And one day I wander into the hotel next door, and there's a desk, JFNA FRD mission. And sure enough, Brian Abraham walks in, who I know well, and I'm like, what are you doing here? And he said, what are you doing here? And I'm telling the story to make a point that we seem to be in two separate orbits. You were at the opening ceremonies. I think you know and share what an amazing, uplifting experience that was. We have a dream of building Jewish pride, not just for athletes and their families, but the whole Jewish community. And wondering if you think there might be some opportunities to do a better job of collaborating in the future.
Well, listen, I'm a big believer in community and collective always. And when things are going swimmingly, we can all kind of swim on our own. But the reality in this pandemic's kind of going to sharpen all those reflexes that we have, that we need to be together. And I think there is a place for that. And we've done it at JFNA through our 146 Jewish federations, and we've as part of our pandemic coalition, we've gathered all the national organizations that are in the human services area, saving lives, whether it's JCCs or family services or Hillels. So there's certainly a place to pull together. And look who's leading this. You have a federation background. Arnie's the CEO in New Orleans, and Donna does great work in New York with youth and children in sports. So we're too small to be splintered, and certainly any way that I can be of help to pull together in some way that you might find helpful, certainly open to work on that. So
all right, Arnie, he's in.
All right, thanks, Don.
You're preaching the converted on all that.
Love it,
Awesome.
love it. Listen, I know we want to get to football, but right before we do that, as you can tell, introducing, I'm just particularly touched by your family, your story, your devotion to your parents, how it shaped how you viewed the world. I know that your family is particularly engaged in Yad Vashem. There's a lot of lessons, the generation, Jeff Buchan's, his mother's a survivor. There may be others touched on this screen as well that I'm not aware of. But we're all touched by our survivors. We're losing them now. It's that generation. And there's enduring lessons. What comes to your mind as enduring lessons for us at this point in time in our history?
Well, listen, for me, and like many of the people listening, what brought me to this work has been family, and for me, my parents, Joseph, Zichron Lebracha, and my mother, Elizabeth, and my grandparents, they were all Holocaust survivors, and each of them could tell an incredible, harrowing yet astonishing tale of survival, and I draw strength from all of that. The lesson I learned was, had there been a strong state of Israel to look after them 70 some years ago, many of the relatives that perished, my grandmother lost 7 brothers and sisters, my aunt perished, and my grandfather had to be hidden under the floorboards of a barn for 2 years to survive. So from that astonishing struggle, they came and they built a life of love of America, of Israel, of Jewish life, and invigorated life, and they passed that down to their children and grandchildren. And that's what our sense of responsibility is. And I think everyone on this call feels that they're part of the Jewish communal life. And that's why I'm speaking here as chair of JFNA. And what the Maccabi movement does is it brings young people, connects them to something larger than themselves. I had that experience through Federation Young Leadership and other things. So I believe, why I'm a big believer in community. I believe the Jewish federations are uniquely capable of impacting the Jewish future, just as the Maccabi movement is. And these are things we have to support, we have to strengthen, and that's really why I do this. And it's so that our next generations can have that same kind of community.
Yeah, I don't know about all of you who are watching and listening. It just fills you up, right? It's that greater sense of purpose. And it brings us together at a time when these kind of discussions are so ever important. So thanks for that. Arnie, if you want to follow up or switch to sports, which is why we're here as well.
Let me follow up, and then we'll get to sports in the next questions. Mark, I also am really touched by your personal story and your commitment. I've asked people that you and I know, how you got involved in the Jewish Federation movement, and and especially with the Holocaust connection. I want to ask you a couple of things. First of all, for the people on the call that may not know about the Federation movement or JFNA, especially the last five months, I've watched with amazement what the national office is doing with you and Eric and other leaders. Talk about some of the things that you've been able to do in public policy. I'm sure you're very proud of the Never Again Education Act, which was passed into law very recently, that deals with Holocaust education. But everything from raising money to help communities and people to the PPE equipment that you've raised all over the country. Just tell a little bit about the work as your chairman of the Federation.
Well, I appreciate that, Arnie, and I thank you for your leadership in New Orleans on that front for so many years. And I'm incredibly privileged to be in a front row seat. We talk about the doctors and nurses that were on the front lines of the pandemic. For our Jewish community, our Federation movement, I think most people on the call are familiar. The Jewish Federations of North America really is the umbrella organization There are 146 federations, 300 network communities. We raise over $1 billion annually for social services, human services, education, family counseling, for the elderly, for Holocaust survivors, and for Israel and around the world. So that's something that I kind of was brought up in, and my parents were super engaged in that. And one example, you mentioned public policy. For the first time in the United States history, the CARES Act, the Small Business Administration, didn't just lend to businesses, but it was expanded to the nonprofit community.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, you know, where your organization fits into it, but I know over $500 million have been received in the PPP loans through the CARES Act. We were instrumental in making that happen, and it has literally saved hundreds of institutions and kept them going and kept many people employed. So you mentioned that. We've had an emergency coalition of 8 major Jewish organizations and the 8 religious streams. We continue to work on what the day after is going to be, what this coming season, this isn't over. The crisis has hit us and now it's settling in. So we've gotten personal protective equipment for nursing homes, over $5 million of that type of equipment. Our Federation security arm, SCAN, the Security Community Network, has worked with all our directors and how to reopen our organizations, our JCCs, our sports facilities, young people, connecting them. We just launched a program for 20 to 25-year-olds called Change Makers. A lot of people, young people that maybe their jobs are suspended, their future's in limbo, and we had, to our surprise, thousands of applications, and our first cohort of 500 is graduating this coming week. So, and in Israel, we're supportive. So there's so many areas we've worked together. We've loaned money for World Jewry, that all the communities that are suffering around the world. JDC is another partner, helping clients in places like former Soviet Union. So the list is endless. The needs are endless. The bottom line is, I can tell you, been privileged to have a first row seat here. We are saving lives. We are keeping our community dignified, educated, fed, and protected. And I think that's something we should all be proud of. And I know I'm very proud of it.
Awesome job, Mark. Awesome. Donna, back to you.
Sure. We also have Kenny Silverboard has put up his Federation of Greater Atlanta.
Yes.
Kenny.
Kenny does a great job down there. And he's working with us in Maccabi on a lot of other projects. So great to have you on tonight, Kenny.
Right. Good to see you. All right. Ready? Let's switch to, all right. We'll ease into this. Real easy question. How does a guy from New Jersey end up owning a team in Minnesota?
Well, that's a really good question. We're still working through that. It's our 16th season coming up. Very exciting. You know, I mentioned my parents being survivors, and in the 50s, a partner. We're in the real estate business. That was the business my father and uncle and grandfather started in the 50s. And one of their early partners happened to be a former college football player, and they started to go to New York Giants games and built some homes for some of the Giant players. And that was our bonding experience with American society, and my parents, and were very supportive and really wanted us to be part of the American scene. So that was our Sundays for all the time. My brother, my cousin, all of us growing up was going to Giants games. That was our family bonding, our escape from the realities of day-to-day life, just as it is for millions of Americans. So grew to love the game of football. They were offered opportunities to invest in football teams. The New York Titans, if they had picked up the payroll of $50,000 in the early 60s, or the Philadelphia Eagles for $6 million or whatever it was then. And those were things that they never really had tremendous interest in. And then we bid on the New York Jets in 2000 and were unsuccessful. And then lo and behold, in 2005, we were going to be part of an investment group, and we were a small minority partner there. And then through the contract process, we ended up becoming the majority owner. And we haven't looked back. We had no real connection to Minnesota beforehand, except maybe some federation speaking that I had done. But it was a great experience. It's been a great experience. It's a great community. They love their football, and they've been very supportive of us. And we've come a long way.
Well, you guys are incredible. I mean, you're incredible owners. What you bring to a community, of course, they're going to love you. Not to mention, you brought a Super Bowl. The team is playing really well. I mean, it's pretty great. Don, do you have any other questions that you wanted? I mean, do you want to ask something about football? Not soccer, but football.
I know about as much about football as you know about ballerinas. So
Talk soccer too.
Wait. I took 8 years of dance, Miss Grace. Me.
All right, I'm going to ask it.
I'm going to
Go
pass
ahead,
it to
Arnie.
Arnie. I'm passing to Arnie.
All right, he's passing to me. So I'm going to get into a little football here. So I got to tell you, Mark, the Vikings, in my experience, go back about 4 games, and you're 3-1 in those games. Okay, one was my first year with the Saints in 2000. You weren't the owner yet, but it was the Saints' first playoff win ever to actually go to Minneapolis and play the Vikings. There was no chance that the Saints had. They were just so happy to win a playoff game that was over. But the 3 games that you will remember, because they came under your tenure, one not so good, but 2 very good. Obviously, the playoff win last year, that was, I'm sure, very special to you. The Brett Favre game in 2009, for Saints fans, I have to tell you, was the dream of all dreams to win that game and go to a Super Bowl. But the game that they still talk about here, and I'm sure they talk about in Minneapolis too, is the miracle in Minneapolis.
Yes.
2017, last play of the game, Stephon Diggs catches a pass on the sidelines. I think time had expired. It was close to expiring, and runs into the end zone. Just, if you will, as an owner, I mean, it's an amazing thing to see that rivalry between the Saints and the Vikings have developed over the years. Touch upon that, and then I got to ask you one more, because I grew up in Green Bay and lifelong Packer fan, and of course,
it's funny you didn't bring up the bounty at all, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't bring up the bounty. The commissioner has barred me from that question to you, so I'm not bringing that up tonight. But talk a little bit. It
has developed into a great rivalry, and you talk about the feeling. And I talked about my folks earlier, my parents. My dad, when we were Giant fans, we'd lose a game when we were kids. As fans, we'd be heartbroken. And he'd try to console us with his perspective and his experience. He said, things could be worse, kids. You could be the owners. So, when you're an owner of a team, you take on the responsibility of being stewards of a franchise. So many people depend, not just the fans, but employees. A lot of their salaries are dependent on how they do and don't do. So it's euphoric when you win. There's nothing, the joy of a winning locker room. I think there are many athletes on this call. They can appreciate any team sport. It's a great feeling. And from ownership to executives to staff to players to coaches to support, everyone feels a part of that team. It's a real family feeling. It is a business, but it's a special thing. So when we had that miracle, Minneapolis miracle, it was truly special, and we enjoyed it. And to your point, it was the last play of the game, but they had changed the rule the year after. We had to spend about 15 minutes to pull 11 guys out of the locker room to kick the extra point. So they changed the rule since then that you don't have to pull 11 guys out to do the extra point. If the game's over, it's over. So it was a really special thing. And then at the same time, those heartbreaks, like you mentioned, you never forget those either. And listen, what drives us every single day is the Vikings have never won a Super Bowl championship. We take responsibility only for 15 of those years, but we know it weighs on the fans, and it's something that drives us every single day, the competitive spirit to win and to win as a team. And, we've brought in our alumni. We have great history from the Purple People Eaters days and so forth. So we have fans all over, and the Saints, of course, as you say, have great fandom as well. So it's what makes sports fun and what makes the NFL fans great, and the NFL is such a great product.
Mark, Harold Smith here.
Harold.
Yeah, how are you? I'm from Minneapolis, and I want to say that the Minneapolis Jewish community, which by the way is great, as you know, are very grateful that the Wilf family has taken over the Vikings franchise, because it enhances the view of the Jewish people in the entire community. And Mark and his family have done a great job in cementing the relationship between the Jewish community and the Wilf family and the entire Minnesota complex. So we're very, very happy to have Mark as, we almost call him as one of our members too.
Well, Harold, that means a lot. And, Harold and I met at a Boca Jewish Federation event a couple of years ago. But Harold is a special person, very supportive of summer camps in Minnesota. And I think our birthdays are just a couple days apart. And a couple of years also. I want to wish you a belated, it's 102, I think.
Oh, my God.
So God bless you, Harold. And I really appreciate your comments and what you do. And your family's great. And hope to see you at the Vikings. If not a game, unfortunately, with what the situation is, we'll look for you on TV and let's celebrate a Super Bowl this year, God willing.
Hey, so Harold and Mark, I got to ask you both a question since you've got that tradition of Minnesota football. So, especially Harold, you remember those days with Bud Grant in the outdoor stadium, and I'm sure Mark knows all about that. So, do you want to go to US Bank Stadium inside and beautiful, or you want to be in that tent below and watching the Vikings beat the Packers?
You have to unmute, Harold. You're muted.
Danny, unmute him if you can.
Okay.
I hear you now.
Metropolitan Stadium was something else. It was outdoor. It was originally built as a baseball stadium. And when you get into November and December, it gets cold. And many times it was snow and 20 below. And I had to put on matkes and gatkes and everything. And we would take a flask of coffee and put a little whiskey in it too. So
This out of our age, don't be silly. It's usually unless it's on sale. I mean, there's a I'm trying to think of if they have the white Caitlin lines. What is that cheap sparkling that I brand or something? It's got a gold label.
Julie Oric, you need to mute yourself, please.
Oh, there you go. Okay, Harold, let me just thank you for piping right in. I just want to let you know we don't have many rules on this show, but you just gave us one that we're going to institute moving forward. In order to open your own mic, you have to be 100 years or older. If you are, you have open access. Open mic for anyone 100.
No rules apply.
Right? Okay, let's everybody give a round of applause for Harold. Awesome. Awesome, Harold. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harold.
All right, Donna, it's up. Back to you.
Oh, I want to stay on football, but actually, I'm just looking at the questions that are coming in, and this one came in, which is interesting. I grew up probably not that far from you, Mark, but I'm a huge Mets fan. Ari, sorry about that. I know you have a distinct love for the Marlins. I am in Florida, but you know how it is. You're a kid, you love the Mets. The Mets are for sale. What do you know about that? Any kind of insights for us on that?
I know what you're reading, and we'll see what happens. The Wilpons are great owners, and full disclosure, my wife and kids were part of that group, and we love the Mets very much, and we'll see what happens. But we got opening day Friday, and excited about the next 60 games, and you never know. You got to believe, as we say.
You have to believe. Totally got to believe. I got to believe. I'm sorry.
Oh, you got to believe.
The Marlins are up 3-0 tonight. I'm sorry. But if there's hope for our Mets, man, I'll tell you what, I gotta weigh in. I gotta weigh in there, right? Let's talk a little bit more about football, right? All the leagues are starting to come back, right? I mentioned the NBA in their bubble had no COVID cases. The NFL is still talking about their safety, but it looks like they're moving along. Major League Baseball is getting ready to open on Thursday night. Do you have concerns? I mean, about being able to...
Of course, there are concerns, but let me just start. First, I got to say I'm optimistic that we're going to play football this season.
Yes.
And we have worked incredibly hard. The NFL, Dr. Alan Sills from Vanderbilt, and he's the chief medical officer. Around the clock, the amount of Zoom calls and meetings with every team having their chief infection officers and all the protocols that are being established, the negotiations with the players. A lot of work has gone on, but I'm confident September 13th at US Bank Stadium, we're going to be opening against the Green Bay Packers. We're working to get our players, our staff, our coaches ready, the stadium. There's a lot of preparations. We're just starting. Rookies reporting on Thursday. We'll have a 2-day period of testing and acclimation. And then next week early on, we're going to have our veterans report. And There'll be a period of practicing. There'll be a period of non-padded practice. Well, first strength and conditioning, then non-padded practice, then onto padded practice, and then the games. So a lot going on. Obviously, we know there's no playbook for any of what we're doing and what we're going through, but we're in constant communication with each other. Our fans, our players, our coaches, their safety is number one, and that's what's guiding everything here. And we need football. Look what happened with the draft. I mean, you had the virtual draft, which we all debated hotly internally. Should we even have it with all the service going on in the world? But it turned out, I applaud the commission and the league, and it was really an uplifting few days that we had that little moment of sanity, and I hope the football season has that as well. And we have the benefit of coming after a lot of the leagues that have had starts and stops here over the last few months, and we'll learn from that as well.
Mark, how often are you going to test the players?
Well, it's being finalized. I think, I don't know if it's finalized, but I think the early first couple of weeks, the way I'm hearing lately, I don't know if this is finalized, it's going to be daily. And then should there be a certain low percentage, I think under 5% that's positive, then we'll go to more of a 3-day per week type of testing. But it's not the invasive, we have a special private testing company. It's not the invasive nasal swab that some of us that have tested might have experienced. It's internal to the nose, but not as invasive as that. And it's a 24-hour turnaround on the results. And like you see with the NBA, hopefully, our facilities, there's a piece on Monday Morning Quarterback, Peter King does for Sports Illustrated, did a big focus on our facility with our head trainer, Eric Sugarman. So I urge you all to look at how we're preparing. And I'm very confident the facilities will be safe and secure. The big question comes when players and staffs and coaches, when they go home or they go out to restaurants and that environment. I mean, it's all about risk mitigation and trying to minimize any kind of health and safety problems for our entire organization. So it's a very complicated thing, but I'm confident we're going to have football.
Hey, Mark, let me stay on that angle for a second here. Obviously, this is a very strange season. I mean, something we've never gone through. And I think in the last day, it looks like preseason games are going to be totally eliminated now from what I've been reading today. But, for a veteran team like the Vikings that were so close, really, last year, I would think that there's some advantage because of that. Obviously, the training camp's going to be a little bit different for all of the players and the younger players. But talk about how you view that. You had a great draft, by the way. You had 2 first-round picks, and everybody obviously in Louisiana knows of Jefferson, a great receiver from LSU. But talk about maybe kind of where you are, because it looks like the Vikings are right there on the doorstep of greatness, and having a more veteran team may actually, work to your benefit this coming season.
Listen, everything we've done as ownership from day one has been to build a stable first-class franchise. It started with a new stadium, which we inherited that battle. We got that done. We have the #1 stadium in the league, #1 facility. And we have a great coaching staff led by Mike Zimmer, our GM, Rick Spielman. So we're confident in the team we have. You're right. We have a great veteran core, but we also have 15 draft picks, the most draft picks we've ever had in a season. That really bodes well for the future. But we normally have a string of OTAs and mini camps where they can learn our system. So that'll be a challenge. And Mike Zimmer's a defensive-minded coach, and we have basically our entire secondary are young new players, except with 1 or 2 exceptions. So that will be a challenge. So I do think there's an advantage to have veteran core and to keep our coaching staff consistent. I also think COVID preparation is going to have an impact in how the competitive side. We hope no team has a situation where the COVID takes a lot of the team out for a period of time. And I think how teams handle the safety and health will hopefully keep competitive balance. And I think that'll definitely be a factor this year. So yes, we have a veteran core, but we also have a lot of young players, and our coaches are going to really have to step it up in terms of over the next 6 weeks, really getting them up to speed in a hurry and with limited, if any, real game practice before the season starts.
So let me ask you, Mark, as an owner, do you have like a game day routine? obviously you're well versed in all aspects of the team, but where do you choose to really pop in? How do you manage game day? Like if we, take us on your day. We want to be with the owner of the Minnesota Vikings when they're playing the Packers.
Well, it's a little interesting because we are out of town. We live in the New Jersey, New York area, so we typically fly out before the game, and we get to the stadium, and we do the similar routine every week. We just hold on for dear life. It's all very pleasant until kickoff. We go to the field, and pre-game we meet a lot of our sponsors, friends, supporters. There's a protocol. We meet the other owner as the coaches meet the other coaches, and we follow all those protocols. And then it's a great time. And then noon Central Time comes, and you're just holding on for dear life. It's just we have great respect for all the teams and partners, our owners around the league, and we are all partners and cordial. But when it comes to those 3 hours, you can't predict. The ball's not round, and particularly at home, you want to really win in your home backyard. And we do have a great game day experience. It's something we're going to try to get as many fans in as we can this year. So, and then it's in the locker room. By the way, it's win or lose, we're in the locker room because it is a private business, but it is a sense of family, and we want to make sure the players know that win or lose, we're with them, and we're on to the next week, God willing, and we keep fighting. So that's kind of the routine. We leave the football folks that know what they're doing to run the team, but we're in constant communication with them, and we ask the questions. We have a meeting every Monday with the football staff, with our head coach, our GM, and the coaches, and we listen to all the injury situations and the what do you call it, the post-mortem, win or lose, and we move on from there. So there's a lot of routine to this, as those of you around football or sports might know. So that's where we're at.
So you're not shuttling in any plays. You're not saying, "Hey, send down this one," huh?
We do have we do like some of those tricks, and we'll kind of throw it in on Monday, say, how about running this and that, but we know what we don't know, so we'll leave it to the coaches to call the plays.
Well, Mark, if we had more time tonight, I'd ask you about that Viking that is at every home game but we'll skip that tonight, and we'll save that for the second show we do with you. But I do want to transition a little bit, especially given what's happened in our country over the last couple months. We've seen among sports owners a real, a renewed sense of social justice. And, I am so impressed by what you've done in Minneapolis, because not only have you reacted in such a strong way to the George Floyd situation. I know I think I read that you have a scholarship fund that you created. You made a $5 million donation to social justice, but you started a social justice committee, I think, well before this, right? A couple of years ago?
Yes.
Right? Can you talk about that? And also, the one thing that I thought was really unique is in the allocation of some of these funds to whatever organizations they go to. I mean, you're really relying on your players to help make those decisions. I thought that was really interesting.
Arnie, thanks for bringing that up. And of course, the George Floyd thing was transformational for so many, the whole country and the whole world, really. And that happened 20 blocks from US Bank Stadium. And like you said, we have been talking to the players for several years now about these issues. When we draft our players, we're very mindful that they're the kind of people that we want to represent the community in a place like you say, in New Orleans or in Minnesota. The players really are an embodiment of the community. So we try to, every one of our players does community service on the day off on Tuesday, Community Tuesday. That's something the Vikings organization started before our ownership, and most teams do it now. So, for example, a couple weeks ago, our players met with the Minneapolis chief of police and several other police officers to talk about race relations and law enforcement reform. I mean, we're very proud of our players. My brother, myself, we participate with the players. Two of our coaches, head coach Mike Zimmer, Andre Patterson, our D-line coach, our GM Rick Spielman, and a couple of our players are particularly engaged. Our linebacker Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, Anthony Harris. Many of them are engage in these issues in a unique way. And we talk about our background as children of Holocaust survivors and what that intolerance and hatred led to. And we hear from the players where many of them, they had middle school or high school games that they remember ducking under the bleachers because there were gunshots after the game. So, right here in this country, they had their own traumatic racial experience. So we share that. And you're right, we do want to hear from the players. We're putting our money behind some of the initiatives that they're behind. Voting justice and voting registration, that's something they're getting behind, especially this fall. The police reform type of issues. So again, we understand the platform we have in the sports world and the NFL franchise. So it's a privilege and an obligation. We got to work and use it for good. So just a great example of young men that we have at the Vikings. And I've been inspired by their work, just like I've been inspired by the work of our federation professionals or what have you in the Jewish community, their work and their speaking out. I know Eric Hendricks and Anthony Barr, they met with the commissioner. The commissioner apologized for some things, and that was very public. And we're working together to try to make a difference. It's not going to be an overnight thing. You mentioned the Never Again Act. This is something our team is really rallying around because that supported Holocaust education for the entire country, and it's supporting the U.S. Holocaust Museum. We've been bringing players to Washington with teens from impacted areas in Minneapolis to Project Success, and we bring them 50 teenagers and our players, and I participated in it. We go to the African American Museum as well as the U.S. Holocaust Museum. So that Never Again Act for the Holocaust education is being replicated now. There's a 1619 Act in the Congress, and that's going to it's going to take that act that we use in the Jewish community and do the same thing in the African American community, so that all school children in this country can learn about African American history. So I know Coach Zimmer is very pro talking about that type of education, and we're going to get behind that as well. Both with my JFNA hat and the football hat, we're going to try to get that to happen too.
Yeah, it's critical. I work with teens all the time. It's so critically important for kids to be able to not only see themselves, learn about themselves, but then learn about each other, which I think is why it was so upsetting to so many when Deshaun Jackson spoke out as he did. And it started this role of commentary. Sometimes I think it's better to hear what people are thinking and deal with it than not hear it at all, right? And so when the rabbi in LA came out to say, Stephen Jackson, let's talk about it, and then some of the football players said, let's go to the museums together, it's evolving, right?
Listen, it's very painful to hear these anti-Semitic comments coming from anyone, but the message I have to keep saying to all of us is we must continue to, like you said, listen to each other and to educate people on this issue. That's why I'm talking about the 1619 Act. And this is not an overnight thing that's going to happen. We have to really educate young people in this country to these issues. We have to call it out when we see hate language, which is what exactly happened here. The NFL and the Eagles spoke out from some of those comments we heard, and we've seen those players apologize. They're continuing to learn. And I think, but for the most part, we have to see that it's a matter of education and to condemn hate talk and make sure we educate and listen.
A lot of folks are writing in. It's hard to pivot off of that. You know what I mean, Arnie? It's like, okay, but people want to know if you think there's going to be fans at the games. They want to know if there's going to be tailgating. Are they going to be one every other seat?
Well, a couple of teams already announced there won't be fans this year, and I think some large cities are. Again, it's jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Our COO Andrew Miller comes from the baseball world. He's been active in our Minnesota community. We have 5 major league sports teams, and we've met with Governor Walz pretty extensively in terms of how to reopen. So we're hopeful we can get fans in the stadium. We think any number, even a few thousand, is better than nothing, and we're going to try to do that. So it's a balancing act based on jurisdiction. The answer is it depends in terms of fans. So some places no, and I was just on a call earlier with the Chiefs, the Chiefs organization. They're going to try to have 20 to 30,000 fans. So it depends, and we'd love to have our fans in the stadium if we could.
Well, I'm in Jacksonville, Mark, so, you know, I don't, Arnie, like, we're in Florida. It's kind of like, yeah, what the heck? Just bring lots of people. If you want to wear a mask, you can. If you don't. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Well, Mark, let me ask you a couple of NFL questions. You got a new team starting in Las Vegas, long time in Oakland and LA. You know, how do you feel about that? That's going to be certainly an interesting market, I think, for the NFL. And actually, I have to ask you a little bit about sports gambling, because if you would have had this discussion a decade ago, 20 years ago, the idea of having a sports team in Nevada would have been unheard of. But the world has kind of changed, and the NFL has changed relative to that topic. Why don't you cover those if you can?
Well, you're right. You know from your sports experience, this has evolved quite a bit, and we just have to make sure the integrity is upheld 100%. And it's going to be an opportunity as far as allowing people to enjoy the games in a legal way, but we have to make sure that the data that they work off is proper, and we can provide that information. So, you know, the new franchises, when we bought the Vikings, we had the worst stadium in the NFL, and we worked with our partners. It's still a business, and we had the support of other teams to help us build our dream stadium, which our fans love. And now Las Vegas has the same opportunity. It's turned out to be a really big success. And it's not just about people from out of town. Las Vegas is a tourist attraction going to the games. The local community there has really embraced it. And I think it'll be a great success. And LA, it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar stadium, which is going to be exciting for two teams. So it's unfortunate that a lot of this is coming during the pandemic here, and those challenges will be difficult for those teams. But I think our fans, we have to compete with the living room experience, which is very strong. And again, this year is so exceptional, but I'm confident when it becomes safe to go and be in public and crowds, people still want to be in that environment. So hopefully we'll get to that place sooner than later.
Hey, Mark, let me ask you just one quick question. Donna asked you kind of a day of game experience. I mean, we don't get NFL owners, you know, every day, so this is very special for us. I want to ask you about being in the owner's room, especially like when you got the Super Bowl awarded. I've had the privilege of being in some of those meetings. They're rather incredible, but especially when an award is made of a Super Bowl. Talk about when Minneapolis got that bowl.
Well, that was great. Minneapolis has had 2 Super Bowls, and very proud of the fact that we were able to. When we bought the team, we not only wanted to get a stadium, but part of the lobbying for the stadium, we did a public-private partnership. We received, we had a partnership where the state and city invested $500 million on a $1.1 billion project. So part of that was an investment to get the big events. So we had the Super Bowl, we've had the Final Four, we've had all kinds of national championships, and we'll hopefully continue to have them. So the process has changed since those days, but at that time it was a process where we had to work. The minute they announced the possibility of a bid, our business community, Richard Davis, who was the chairman of US Bank at the time, the chairman of Ecolab and Carlson Companies, they all rallied to be leading this cause and raised $40 million to host the Super Bowl from the civic community. And it is a civic enterprise, as you know, in New Orleans. And we competed. We competed with New Orleans and Indianapolis at the time to be awarded the Super Bowl. And it took hand-to-hand combat, lobbying the owners. And we really made the case that we made a real commitment that the NFL should recognize that the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis really stepped up, and we were able to get that Super Bowl. It was very exciting. Now, a lot of the staff works with each city to kind of stack them up. We have the next 5 to 6 years of Super Bowls lined up now, and it's a much more thoughtful plan. And it was an exciting few weeks. We were 1 game away, as you know, from being the first team ever to be in a Super Bowl in their host city. So it was exciting. Thankfully, we had 2 weeks to recover from that tough loss, and we're able to pivot and host and really show the world. Even though it was cold weather and cold air, we had a beautiful building. It turned out to be a great game between the Eagles and the Patriots, and it was a great week for the community, and they stepped up in an amazing way. And these northern and Midwest communities really appreciate the opportunity more than some other cities that might just get them on a more regular basis. So it was a great experience for us as ownership. It was a great win for our partners, our sponsors, our friends now from the Minnesota community and the business community that helped us get the stadium built. So it was a win on a lot of fronts.
You know, I don't think people really realize just how industrious Minnesota and Minneapolis in particular. I mean, they're the home for so many Fortune 500 companies. It's an amazing, amazing place. We don't have much time, Mark. I told you this would fly. 2 quick questions. It's interesting. You're part of an MLS franchise, and we haven't even talked about MLS, which actually is troubling to me on one level, but also indicates like everybody wants to talk about football. Okay. But Ari Ackerman has been with us. He's one of our regulars. He's also part of the Marlins ownership group. And he asked, and I'm going to ask on his behalf, he wants to know your thoughts on kneeling during the anthem across all sports. He also wants to remind you that he's a proud co-chair of JFNA cabinet under your leadership.
Well, not only does he not have to remind me, Ari's going to be a great co-chair. And as Don Kent mentioned before, that was one of the formative experiences of my life, the National Leadership Cabinet of the Federation and UJA. So he's in a great line, and it's our 60th year of the Young Leadership Cabinet. So Ari's great. That's a difficult question with the kneeling. I know when we had those issues several years back, we decided our response was going to be as a team, as ownership, as coaches, administration. We decided to huddle together, and out of that was born a discussion of social justice, as I mentioned before. It's going to be a very different environment now. I will not kneel. I'm a big supporter of, I know what America has done for my family, and we will stand for the national anthem. I respect other viewpoints on it, and hopefully we'll whatever decision we come to, we will hopefully do it as a team. But we understand the troubling times, and we certainly understand personal perspectives on this, and we have to respect that. So it's a very challenging situation, but I think also our sensitivities and sensibilities on this have evolved too when you see some of the horrible things you're seeing in the community and the things that we have to all face. Each of us have to look individually to our own viewpoints and maybe be tolerant and say, you know, there are other perspectives here. So I realize it's a difficult question. I don't have an easy answer for you. I know for the Vikings, I can tell you we're going to try to approach it as a team, but understanding that there may be some individuals that might feel differently.
Fair enough. Great answer. Really honest. Arnie, we made a commitment that we wouldn't keep Mark all night between us and Mark. You and I didn't agree to that yet, did we? Now it's see Rebecca. Rebecca, it goes fast. It really goes fast. Arnie, I have some closing stuff. Is there something you want to bring us home with? There's a couple of other questions here, but I don't think we're going to have time tonight. Great conversation.
I'll tell you what. Let's take the we'll have the questions, and I'll forward them over to Rebecca, and we get an answer. We will. So we'll try to answer those. Why don't you make some comments on it? Then you and I are going to end it with kind of a fun little quick segment about sports and predictions. So
okay, I got you, Arnie. I'm ready for you. I think I'm ready for you. So let me thank all of you. Barry Kleiman, I finally saw you jump on. I'd love to say every one of your names. Evan, always so glad that you joined. Eric, Bob, Adam, Eugene, Jay, Jared. This is kind of like a lot of you. Marshall, like, you know, we know you're here. We're so happy.
Chicken Norma, got to give him a shout out.
Who else?
Chicken Norma from Philly.
Okay, yes. And of course, everybody, we are all devoted to Harold Smith and we have the Harold Rule now. Maccabi USA Sports has the Harold Rule. So thank you for that tonight, Harold. Mark, you are just amazing. So appreciate your candor, your commitment, your passion, how you stand up for all of us means so much, really means so much. I want to thank also our MUSA team led by our president, Jeff Buchanan. I saw Jeff's filing through here. Our CEO, Marshall Einhorn, our amazing producer, Dan Kurtz. Dan's mother, Joyce, who's become one of my best friends. Mackenzie Mager, and thanks to Steve and Shane and our whole team. It's awesome. Next week, we're sticking with football, actually, Mark. We have Jeff Schwartz. He's one of the only two Jewish brothers teams that played in the NFL. The first one played, anyone have an idea? 1923, Ralph and Arnold Horween. We probably should do some trivia and give out prizes. I really see us game-oriented here, Arnie. He was a 7th-round draft pick by the Panthers in 2008, had a 10-year career. He wrote a book called Eat My Schwartz, Our Story of NFL Football, Family, Food, and faith. He wrote it with his brother Mitchell. Pick up a copy, and then next week we can also talk with Georgia and have a book club at the same time. What do you think?
He was on the Vikings too. Don't
He
forget.
was on the Vikings. Yeah. He definitely was on the Vikings. That was a test. You get a prize. Really good. Okay, Arnie. So, and also let me just also mention on Thursday night, Shifty is going to be hosting Coach Brown, which will be a lot of fun. Larry's always interesting and has a lot of interesting things to say. So I wanted to let everyone know that. We'll be back on August 4th, so mark your calendars. And now, Arnie, what's the prediction here?
Well, first of all, let me echo your comments, Mark. Thank you so much for such a wonderful evening. I mean, you're an inspiring leader, both sports-wise, Jewish-wise, and every other way. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. So, Donna